I remember back during the mid 2000s, anime was becoming more and more mainstream, at least where I live in Canada. And the main reason for that is we have a TV channel called YTV or Youth TV, and they took the initiative in broadcasting a lot of anime series. Now, we had Pokemon and Digimon and Monster Rancher and Fighting Foodons and all that kind of stuff, mainly for kids for a long time, but they started broadcasting stuff for older people, stuff like Visions of Escaflowne, Gundam Wing, Witch Hunter Robin, Inuyasha. I mean, some of those are kind of general all age things, but they started to broadcast stuff with more complex themes and more adult plot lines. Not only was there wide TV, but that was when file sharing was really becoming big. I don't know if anyone here is old enough to remember Napster. That was a little bit before my time, but Kazaa, FrostWire, LimeWire, really early torrents. I have fond memories of downloading Evangelion on a torrent 1 kilobyte per second at a time on a dial up connection. It may have taken me a couple of months, but I got it. And it was a pretty incredible experience. But we can talk about that some other time. My point is, anime was starting to become more and more accessible. I know I watched just about all of Naruto before it even started to be aired in North America with the dub. And if anyone has lived in the GTA or Southern Ontario, we have this place called the Pacific Mall, which is run by Asians, and you can basically get any anime series there bootleg for like $20. So, like I said, there was access, and people were starting to really kind of get into some of this stuff. Now, I remember at school, something that was being passed around, at least in kind of the more nerdy community, was a ROM for a game called Tsukihime. And I'm like, is this an RPG? Is this an RTS? Like, what is this? They're like, it's a visual novel. And I was like, what the hell is a visual novel? And they're like, well, it's kind of like a game that's also a novel. And they were just like, look, it's really good, Argent. Just give it a try. So I popped in Tsukihime and I started playing it. And I really enjoyed it. Once again, that was when I was first kind of realizing that anime could be used to tell kind of more adult or mature or philosophical stories, and the game impressed me a lot. The writing was generally speaking pretty good. Compared to a lot of visual novels I've read, there really wasn't that much in the way of fluff. I find, because I've tried periodically reading them over the years, but I can just never get very far. But I finished Tsukihime and I finished all five roots for it, and I really enjoyed it. So then later on, I learned that the company who made it was called Type Moon, and I enjoyed Tsukihime. And I'm like, oh, so there's a new product that they put out, Fate Stay Night, and I'm like, okay, it looks like they've actually had some money this time. Some of the character designs still look like something that somebody would sketch in ninth grade. Like Archer's and Lancer's character designs look like I said, something somebody would sketch ninth grade for their first attempt at an anime character. But I'm like, overall, it looks like this thing's got pretty decent artwork, so let's give it a try. So I popped it in and I tried playing Fate Stay Night, and I was so bored. I couldn't I played it for 2 hours, nothing happened, and I gave up. I tried coming back to it, I think, two more times. I even tried watching someone do a let's play of it on YouTube so I didn't have to actively engage with it. And it was so boring, so drawn out, so just bad. I just never could get into it. And I've been curious about it over the years because I do like a lot of the characters from it. I like Green a lot, and I liked Artoria a lot. And I was like, you know what? I really kind of want to get into this and kind of know what it's about. And when I started looking at it again a couple years ago, I was just like, what the hell is this? There's like Fate Stay Night. Okay, that makes sense. Then there's Fate Extra. Then there's Fate Grand Order. Then there's Fate If. There's non predetermined if. There's indeterminism if. There's hard indeterminism if. There's AU, OU, OC, F you. There's like 50 billion side things. Every character has 20,000 like alternate versions. And it was just like the most insane shit I've ever seen. And it's like, this is worse than the Marvel extended universe. This is the worst extended universe I think I've ever seen. And I guess that's just how Type Moon is they make a product that stands alone, like Tsukihime or Fate Stay Night, and then they don't make another product that stands alone. They just make a billion like things in the extended universe. And maybe it's like hypocritical because of how much I like the Star Wars EU and like the Song of Ice and Fire EU and kind of stuff like that. But to be perfectly honest, I just don't think there's enough here to justify it. I don't think the original was that good, was that interesting. Maybe to give it a sequel or two, or like a prequel or a spin-off. But I guess just because it's a fantasy battle royale scenario and it showed up at just the right time when these things started to become a trend, that it could really latch onto that. And it became the premier fantasy battle royale thing where we're going to have a billion different bullshit spin-offs of it. So that being said, I really wanted to figure out what the hell this thing even was. And a friend of mine wanted to watch Unlimited Blade Works because it's made by Ufotable. And Ufotable did Demon Slayer. And I'm not a big Demon Slayer fan, but the artwork was really good. So I'm like, okay, let's just watch it. So before we get into this, I'm going to say one thing for this show. If nothing else, the voice acting in the dub saves it. I don't even know how I would feel about this show if I didn't watch the dubbed version of it. Because if I watched the non but because watching the dubbed version of it made me enjoy it a lot more. So firstly we have Mela Lee, who voices Rin Tosaka, who I'm a big fan of. Mainly because Rosen Maiden's one of my all-time favorite shows, and she voices Shinku. And Shinku is a very proper upper-class lady who's also a tsundere, although I think she's a fairly mild one. And that kind of works perfectly. And that works perfectly for Reen, because that's what she is. She's an upper-class, sophisticated girl who's a bit of a tsundere. I don't really find Reen to be much of a tsundere, to be honest. She's an extremely mild one. I don't really get why she's the like poster child. Probably because she's like a tsundere that's done right, I guess. She's not like Taiga or really abusive towards the hero. So that helped. So that was good. Secondly, we have Saber's voice actress, Carrie Walgren, who I'm not really familiar with anything else she's done, but she had the perfect voice for Artoria. This kind of deep, somewhat deep, very solemn, very she sounds exactly like what you would expect a female knight who's been transported to the modern day would sound like, I guess. But it really, really suited the character and it helped. Probably the best one though is Bryce Papenbrook, if I'm pronouncing it properly, who voices Emiya. Now I hated Emiya when I played the game. I thought he was whiny. I thought he was his like justice boner was obnoxious. That he had no common sense. That he was just really really annoying. Just kind of like the worst aspects of a shonen protagonist. But then I started watching it and I'm like, you know, it sounds kind of familiar. I feel like Emmy is telling me to join the Survey Corps and fight for freedom. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's Aaron Yeager. And it just kind of clicked because there is a lot in common with the two characters. Mostly that their determination and their willingness to do anything to achieve their ideals really overlaps a lot. They're both kind of at similar ages. They're both the kind of inferior sidekick to a high status woman who's better than them at basically everything. Stuff like that. Even some of the way they talk is kind of similar. Now, don't get me wrong, Aaron Yeager is much better than Emiya, but it made the character tolerable for me And I admit I kept making rumbling jokes and stuff like that as I was going through, which I know is a bit cringy, but it made me enjoy the show more. So without that, I think this probably would have been unwatchable for me. But because of those three voice actors, this show actually didn't turn out too bad. Now that we're 10 minutes in and we haven't actually even talked about the show itself, but that's kind of deliberate. I'm kind of doing something a little meta here. Because nothing Type Moon puts out really has anything to do with what Type Moon puts out. It has to do with the billion side tangents. And so the majority of this review is side tangents. Now, Unlimited Blade Works itself, I don't really want to go into. Basically, I think it's 7 mages. Each summon a servant who's a historical or literary figure from another time, and they do a battle. They're each based on an archetype, and they have a battle royale, and whoever wins is able to make a wish. And I guess the the two most important servants are Archer. We're gonna do spoilers. Archer is actually Emiya from an alternate timeline, and Artoria Pendragon. I like Artoria a lot. The idea of having kind of a gender swap King Arthur, I thought was kind of a fun idea. I don't think they really shit on it because she does act very much like how you would expect an idealized knight to act. I also do like her kind of dress. Armor is kind of cool looking, and an invisible sword is kind of an interesting touch. So she's pretty cool. Archer is just, oh, Archer is Archer. Lancer looks like something from like I don't want to insult cereal boxes. His design just looks truly horrendous. But anyways, they come together to have this battle royale, and Emiya's like, I'm not gonna attack you, Reen, because I want to be a hero of justice, and I'm gonna fight in the Holy Grail War, even though I don't know why I'm gonna fight in the Holy Grail War. And Reen's just like, for whatever reason, likes Emiya. I don't really know why she likes him. I guess because she likes his determination and she thinks that him being determined is kind of Chad. So she keeps saying that she's going to kill him, but Emiya is just like. It's weird because if Emiya was a bit different, he could be like a really like Chad character. Like if he was just a little bit more flirtatious, he's like, you wouldn't kill me because you like me too much, or something like that. Or just being like, go ahead and make my day or something. But it's more just, he's just, I don't know, it's hard to describe him. He just basically yells about how much he loves justice and complains a lot about how justice isn't being met. Like, that's half the show. So him and Reen are going decide to form an alliance. I like Reen's character a lot because, like I said, she's kind of a very mild tsundere, where she's not so much like hot and cold towards Emiya. She obviously likes him. I don't mean like him. They eventually get together, obviously, but she likes him as a person. She's just extremely frustrated with his retardation, his inability to understand the situation he finds himself in, and stuff like that. And because she's basically a good person, she doesn't really want to kill him or kill any other kind of innocent parties involved in it. So I feel like that's if she's a tsundere at all, it's because she's irritated with Emiya acting retarded, which I don't really even consider to be that tsundere. So I don't really get why people even kind of put her in that category. It's extremely mild, and Emiya really deserves everything and more. Pretty much everybody in this show gets angry at it. So I'd say this show is divided into kind of thirds, where the first two-thirds were okay. You had a main villain in Castor, who actually wasn't a bad main villain because she had some like 40 chess plan to cure the common cold, where she was starting off like a mini tournament within the tournament, and she was running gay ops behind the scenes, and she was turning people on other people, and she was a servant who had other servants, And it just was this like Machiavellian plan that was kind of cool. But she dies approximately 2/3 of the way through, along with the other main villain, this like evil priest. And it's like, okay, so who's the villain then? They're like, isn't an obvious villain, so Gilgamesh becomes the main villain. I don't really get what his motivations are. He just seems like a whiny brat who's really annoying. He's not scary, he's not clever, he's not interesting, he's not cool. He's not even fun to hate, he's just annoying. And then he becomes the new villain, and then they're trying to like play up the stakes and stuff like that. I'm like, but you just killed off like all the villains you were building up for the most of this series. You've already kind of resolved a lot of stuff, so like why do we even care? Like this show had like three climaxes. The first climax was when Castor died. The second climax is when Emiya and Emiya have their like 5 episode battle. And then there's the final climax, which is just kind of completely irrelevant. It's just a nothing burger. And that brings me to like the worst part of this show, which is any scene where Emiya and Archer are on screen together. Because all they do is just talk about nonsense, and it's this like pseudo existentialist, nihilistic thing where they just talk about hypocrisy and sacrificing yourself and justice, and like it's meaningless. It could be maybe interesting and could have been a chance to maybe kind of deconstruct the hero's journey or deconstruct kind of like the idea of wanting to be a superhero, but it just doesn't at all. It's just basically Archer twirling his fedora, complaining about how bad his life was and how much he hates his previous self, and Emiya whining about justice. And it's basically that for like 5 episodes, and it was unendurable. And it's like the show is just very bloated. I think they could have made Unlimited Blade Works like half as long and twice as good. I just think on the whole, it's something that's very okay. It's kind of a mediocre premise that has a couple above average characters that because it showed up when it did and because it's kind of like Pokemon or something, it's just something that really taps into a zeitgeist and fills a niche within the anime ecosystem, I guess. It just got more popular and more well regarded than I think it really had any right to. Like I said, it's something that's very okay, but I don't really get aside from like the waifus why this thing is so big. I guess it's so big because it's so big. It's like the Facebook. It's such a big show because it's such a big show, because the game's so big and because there's 50 billion spin-offs of Fate Stay Night. It just it makes people think it's something, and then they just kind of start watching it. I tried watching Fate Zero. Fate Zero was horrible. I couldn't get through more than like 6 episodes of Fate Zero, and even that was a stretch. It just has the like I can't describe the Type Moon writing. Maybe someone in the chat can. I find Type Moon has a very specific writing style that leaves a lot to be desired, and it was okay in the context of Tsukahime just because of how that story was told, and that it was kind of slower and it was more kind of a psychological analysis type thing. Whereas I just don't think it really works for an action series, but that might just be me. I don't know. Unlimited Blade Works was okay, I guess. I'd probably give the show like a 6 out of 10, which is in some ways kind of the worst score I can give some. No, the two worst scores I think I can give something are a 4 or a 6. Because a 4 is like the ass end of mediocrity, and 6 is like the upper end of mediocrity. To me, a 5 is like it's a mixed bag. Like there's things I liked about it, there's things I didn't like about it. Maybe 5 is like the middle end of a mixed bag, 3 is like the low end of a mixed bag, and seven's like the upper end of a mixed bag. But this wasn't even really a mixed bag, it was just kind of a meh. Okay, that was a show. I'm glad it's over. And in some ways, that's kind of worse than if it had been something really bad. Like, it's not as bad as, like, Id Detective or, like, some other shit that I've watched that I haven't even been able to review, but it just wasn't good.